Welcome to Lead Live, reminding you of your personal genius and how you think in order to actualize what you desire. Well, hello again to Lead Live. Today we'll discuss what is business success really. And from our guest perspective, it really is freedom. So we're going to learn how best to deal with the daily challenges of strategy, creative, and branding. This, I call them dynamic dual. Actually, dynamically helps entrepreneurs, creatives, and thought leaders build and practice the ideas of hope and play. Remember those two words, hope and play. Their insights are reflective of decades of experience, focused leading and deep reading across disciplines, including emotional intelligence, behavioral science, and economics and design. They take all this and distill it into a structure that simplifies and translates these complex concepts into actionable methods and mindsets. Now, they're going to challenge us because they challenge preconceived notions of how to lead, how to build a successful business, and even how to view reality. And through their nonprofit, the 510 Media Foundation, they test and explore new ideas and deep cultural solutions that shrink Black economic challenges, negative belief systems, and power gaps in the community. Countless individuals have benefited from and continue to benefit from their tools, learn to develop more accurate perceptions of the needs of customers and clients, and significantly increase their business health because they're better equipped to work with their teams and be more creative while solving important, crucial human problems central to their success. So who are these individuals? Nana, Kofi, Inti, and Mashama, Carter-Thompson. Well, they're co-founders of 510 Media. And Nona, changing his name. I'm sure he's laughing in the background. Nana Kofi Inti is known for his commitment to the Black community in business and dedication to Black entrepreneurship in his local community and beyond. As a co-founder of 510 Media, he's responsible for the strategic vision of the business. And under his leadership, 510 Media has grown from a photography studio to a brand strategy and management agency, focusing on finding creative solutions that move audience into action. Honed over 15 years, this gentleman has authored an unconventional approach to creativity anchored in human connection through deep listening, storytelling, and shared experiences. Sound familiar? Storytelling? Historically, what have our ancestors done in order to catapult the next generation to leadership and transformative leadership? This approach has earned Nana and 510 Media a reputation for creating brands and stories that build connections and change the way clients show up to their audience. Active in the community, this gentleman, Nana, created Frame, F-R-A-M-E, a free editorial photography course open to anyone in the community. He's led the class for several years before handing over the reins to a group of highly talented, hand-selected photographers that apprentice directly with him. Mashama, Carter-Thompson, as I said, co-founder. This gentleman serves as creative director for 510 Media, a creative brand studio. Over the past 15 years, he's served also as operating or chief brand strategist, creating means for a creative and strategic team to do much more than what many creative and strategic teams do in the physical and digital space across many industries. His work is driven by a simple thesis: communicate a client's message through the creation of a beautifully simple, human-centric, engaging design. He has served on the Adobe design panel for 5 years, working directly with the future leaders of design. Their insights, these two gentlemen, Nana and Mashama, their insights come from 20 plus years as practitioners working with businesses and individuals to increase their odds of success through meaningful and sustainable practices rooted in our human need to be seen, heard, and understood. With that, I think humble presentation, and I could have said much more, and will hopefully say much more before this session is over. I'd like to ask Nana and Mashama to join us right now. And as they join us, I'd like us to start with Nana and ask him, and then ask Mashama to follow, to say something, share something that we would otherwise not know about you, we can't find on Google, to introduce you to the live audience.
Well, I think there's two things I can say quickly. One is that most people would never know that one of the ways I wind down because I don't drink or smoke is I play NBA 2K20. I'm 52 years of age and I'm pretty good. And the other one is that is as alpha male as I may come off, I am extremely soft around my daughter. That's something.
That is beautiful. And she's a gorgeous young girl.
Thank you.
Yeah, still a baby.
Thank you.
Powerful young baby.
And Mashama.
I think one thing that people would rarely know unless they attended class is that my first two career choices was one to become an FBI agent, and two to become a stand-up comedian. Wow. Neither of those things came true, but I do like jokes and I do like to investigate into problems. So, kind of doing it.
Yeah, you are. Brilliantly. Interesting. Wow. Well, I haven't heard as many of your jokes, but I see you on the receiving end of jokes in terms of laughter. Yeah.
You just need to be in the office more often and you'll get it.
Oh, I'll get it. Okay. I'll need to visit you. Wonderful. Well, I want to start off with, you two are known throughout the greater Bay Area and now across the country because of the clients you serve, whether they are large municipalities or corporations or actual individuals who are new entrepreneurs or seasoned entrepreneurs who are looking to make a transformative difference. And I'm thinking about the folks who have degrees from Stanford, a Ivy League institution, individuals who have degrees from Laney College, a community college, as well as individuals with PhDs, MBAs, et cetera, who are coming to you and learning things that they would otherwise not know. So how did you two come to collaborate and in a way that some of my dear friends would call co-creation? And how did you come to partner to develop this, what we call 510 Media?
I guess I go first. I'll start off some of it and Mashama can fill in some points. Well, at the age of 22, I became pro-Black. And for years, I was the guy walking around with the cognitive distortion of what people should do. And I realized that was ineffective. And I realized that also that I didn't know how to build. And I really shouldn't be telling people what they should do if I haven't built anything myself. And so I decided to, I wanted to build something that would teach me how to create and build and kind of learn how to live in the wild. And so I quit my job and started with 510 Media because at the time, my favorite hobby of all times was photography. I would take pictures over going on a date. That's how much I love photography. And so I used to play basketball with Mashama's father, and he's a he used to beat me with his famous hook shot all the time. And so I asked him, I told him that I was excited about starting this new company. He said, well, my son just graduated from Humboldt. You should meet my son. And I met with Mashama. Mashama said, he was working for EA at the time. So he said, okay, you know what? I'm interested in giving this a go, but I have a question for you. Why are you doing this?
Mm.
Because if our whys don't align, I'm not sure if I'm gonna do this. And I said, well, honestly, I'm doing it because at the end of the day, I want to impact Black people, and also I want to create an institution that becomes like a miniature version of Harlem and Oakland, where some of the greatest people come through our space, and they will rub off on each other and enhance the overall talent of our community. And he said, well, that's exactly what I want to do. And in our long journey together, I think we've been together for 15 years. I think we've had 2 arguments in 15 years, which is insane. Mashama, you want to add anything to that?
I mean, I think that was pretty much it. The only thing I would add is that we coalesce sort of through the natural progression of the world, you know, through my dad. But what kept us together before we even knew what this was growth mindset. We had a relentless sense of wanting to get better and challenging each other every day to get better. And that's how we moved from doing photography and flyers to, you know, large campaigns, and a lot more idea work was through that practice of every day, every year, really the internal self-driven commitment of 2 really competitive people, wanting to be better at their craft and growing and learning. That really set our success up before we even knew really what we were doing. And I think something that we'll get into is redefining success instantaneously in order to move forward. That was crucial. So I think there was a lot of physical things, but there was those 2 really strong mental connections built on the foundational values of how do we show up for the Black community? How can we build value in our image? Those are things I grew up with. They were huge conversations for me with me and my mentor in college. Was all around how do we build something other than we're going to get out the hood by playing basketball, football, or rapping. And I believe that there was a whole lane of creativity and art and commerce and this mixture that could be that. So that was that. I think those were like the foundational things that really allowed us to, one, just come together in the beginning, but sustained us. And why our arguments, you know, are super few and far between, because we're all really externally focused on doing better work for our clients and better work for the community.
I just have chills. I heard aligned vision. I heard growth mindset. I heard challenge to get better. I heard redefining success internally. I heard being really focused on how to build something and understanding this intersection that you are part of, that really defines who you are. I'm paraphrasing, perhaps not very well, but creative, art, and commerce. And that the essence of what you want to do is build in order to make the environment, the community, the society much better. Wow. Wow.
Thank you.
Powerful. So brilliant. And I am proud to have you both on Lead Live. That's what this show is about. It's about leadership. It's about understanding one's ability to be transformative. I know that word is used almost like interesting, but I really mean it in the truest sense. And that's what you're doing.
Yeah.
Let's go to the next question. You use the word hope and you use play. What do you mean by those 2 words? In fact, you use them to define offerings that you're providing. Can you start with hope, Nana, and then go to play, Mashama?
Yeah. So let me take it back a little bit. So me and Mashama have this thing where every year we have to be better than we were the year before. To this day, that's still a rule. Matter of fact, Mashama says if we're having the same conversation next year that we're having to now, we failed. And so in that, in the micro side of those practices is that we study every day, hour to hour and a half a day, religiously for 15, 20 years. This has been the ritual, which is part of our growth. And so at one point, I'm sitting next to Mashama, and we're doing all this behavior science work with City of San Francisco, with some of our large clients like Genentech. Um, we worked with Oakland School District. We work with American Male Achievement. We work with numerous organizations. And so in the process of working with numerous organizations, I looked at Mashama and said, a lot of the stuff that we're teaching, Black folks just don't know this. They don't know, and it's not in our schools, in our colleges. It's not in our barbershops. It's not in our churches. And I think I want to teach it. And mind you, we had just finished saying that we're no longer going to call ourselves pro-Black. We're going to call ourselves progressive Black. The reason we reframed that is because there's a narrative from Booker T. Washington when he talked about the end of slavery, and he was saying that the slaves celebrated when they received information that Lincoln had freed the slaves. They were celebrating, and then that evening they became highly depressed because they realized they didn't know what freedom was. And so what we started to realize is that the Black community was excellent at discussing identifying oppression, but we were not mature. We never ever actually got to the point where we were discussing freedom and the mindset and all the disciplines that go along with the discussions around freedom. And so hope was born out of that, because I realized that our people, because we focused on defense as opposed to offense, becoming hopeless. We started looking at that. Because we talked about defense all the time, we started to frame white people as superior indirectly and frame ourselves as inferior indirectly. And so what ended up happening is that we started to accept that maybe there's nothing we can do. And then we would constantly quote, Black Wall Street. We would quote the bombing in Philadelphia. We would quote COINTELPRO. We would quote all these. We would highlight all these different things, crack being delivered in our communities. And so we were always framing our situation as being the victim. So we know that, one of the rules of active passive thinking is that you might not be responsible for how you got there, but you're responsible for how you're going to get out of there. And so what we decided to do is build a business course, because we realized that business is at the core of developing a healthy society. It retrains society. It reshapes society. It controls not only the economic system, but the housing system, the health system. It controls the whole infrastructure. And so we decided to create a course because we realized that in business, what hurts people in business is not tactics. It's not lack of strategy. It's not lack of resources. It's psychological factors. And those psychological factors, like, for example, you could tell a person what to do, but getting there is another journey. It's another challenge. And so a lot of times we don't understand the impact of everything from psychological distortions to biases to how the heuristics is corrupted at early stages, mindset. All these different things are impacting our everyday. And in the end, and also the number one is ego. Ego is a result of people not feeling like they're good enough. And so they don't feel like they're good enough. They pump themselves up to the point that they exaggerate their reality, and to the point that they no longer can properly perform in that reality. And so what we found that African Americans, because we don't feel like we're good enough, and also our Latin community, because we have Latin students as well, because they don't feel like they're good enough, what we saw them doing is underperforming in all these areas, as well as being distorted by their beliefs are distorted. Their ego's creating huge distortion. They have emotional intelligence problems. We're also seeing logical fallacies in our communication. So we saw all these different challenges.
What do you mean by fallacies? Give an example.
For example, if I told you, famous one, I've heard many people say, "Hey, you should vote," and if the young person would say, "Why?" and the next response is, "Because people die for it." What you did was you played on that person's emotion as opposed to answering a person's question. And so then what it does is that Because if people die for it, doesn't mean that today in 2020 that it's still a smart move. Even though I believe, I'm not challenging voting, please. I totally believe in voting. What I'm challenging is that how we prove these points, and we interject these ideas that are common sayings or common ideas that we've preached over years and years, like you have to work twice as hard to get half as much. All these comments that we always say, they're actually fallacies, mean that when you say them, they sound good, but they're actually illogical. And the problem with illogical, when you communication with all these illogical ideas, when it comes time to use use strategy to move your business forward, your strategy become corrupted because you have a lot of illogical ways of thinking.
Got it.
You have to kind of clean up your logical way of processing things. And so Hope was born out of this idea of, we want to introduce the Black community to business, but we want to introduce it to from a space of not prescriptive teaching, but from critical thinking, from dealing with psychological factors, showing people that, hey, it's not a matter of you just don't have enough practice, enough money, but the way we're thinking is undermining our business. You don't need a lot of money to start a business, but it's the way you think is going to impact the way you show up. And so what we found is that my wife, she graduated from San Francisco State, and she graduated and she mastered it. She took her degree was in entrepreneurship, and the things we teach in class, she said, we never heard this before. A lot of my students are from, Cal, Berkeley, Stanford. I even have Harvard's PhD students in my class, and they even argue like, we've never heard these things before. Now the information out there, it's just not in our communication. It's not in our culture, and so Hope is designed to restore hope to our business community, so we can eventually restore hope to our actual community.
Got it. Powerful. Restore hope. Yeah, restore hope. Now play is curious. Like hope was. Now we have it more illuminated. So talk to us about play, Mashama.
Well, I mean, it's funny that you say play is curious, because that's kind of the point. Let me start sort of the beginning of where it came from. So Nana was pressuring me to do a class. Thank you for doing that. I appreciate it.
It's all your fault, Nana.
Yeah, he was putting a lot of pressure on me, probably for a year and a half, to really build something that we could deliver to the community based upon my insights and experience. And so as I thought about this, I set out to design something that I thought would help me when I started my career. And so what I noticed was that as we gained success and we gained traction and we gained clients and we grew, our strategies, our methodologies became very stagnant, because once you grasp success, you're like, let me repeat this. Let me repeat this, right? And so you build a system, a formula, an approach to building a brand or building a campaign or whatever it is. And you kind of lose the whole magic and mystique and power of creativity in that, because things become stale. And so as I thought about where we were at the time and how we could get out of that, play is the most natural time when we welcome uncertainty. In every instance, when we're kids, the dynamics of play mean that we do not want to know the outcome. We are free to fail. We are free to experiment. And for me, I just saw that lacking in our own mindset, our own business. We're B2B, so all the businesses and organizations we work with, everybody was talking about innovation, but nobody wanted risk. And so the idea of play unlocks all of that. When you approach the mindset and you say, hey, we're going to dive into uncertainty, we're going to figure things out and we're going to have fun. We're going to introduce the idea of just play. That's where it all came from. And so what I believe it enables us to do is it gives us a space where we can be loose and, again, welcome that uncertainty, and then let go of some of our beliefs and biases. We start play at the point of human perception. Literally, how do we perceive the reality around us, right? Our collective reality. How do we perceive that? How our senses work? The amount of what we can hear, what we can see, what we can touch is only a small fraction of what's out there. And so we start in that place of perception. Hopefully that breaks us down to know that whatever we see is only a fraction of what's there. So that gives us opportunity that other people can have a different perspective on the same exact bits of data or stimulus. And hopefully that opens us up to some empathy that allows us to really observe people. And once we get to those, once we understand those spaces, we can really move into creation for a group of people. And so play is really that examination of behavior, human behavior, and branding, and where those two things come together, and how we can show up and serve the people that we're seeking to help. Bring value to people. I think that is my number one goal with play, is to enable people to have fun, be loose, create, innovate, accept risk, but ultimately to bring value to those they seek to serve. And so that's kind of where we landed with the second class called play.
Okay, I want to make reference. We have a number of comments. I want to just call attention to them before we go into other questions. And I want us to come back to play in a moment, because there's a question that's in my head. Shamini says, greetings and salutations to us. And C, I think it is, Demal. I've been part of the Hope community for 5+ years and the photo class for even longer. These two brothers have been an inspiration, or are making an immeasurable impact on the community, ! And then Shamini asked the question, how has ideation evolved through the years to you, or for you two? And before you answer that, think about that for a moment. She goes on to say, excellent points on bringing hope by reframing the determinant factors via psychological structures. And then Dr. Solomon, we're going to come back to Shamini's question. Dr. Solomon indicates good information. Tomoko says hi. And Zarek says, I'm loving the focus around mindset, perception, perspective. You all are dropping some valuable gems. Thank you. And then before we go back to that question from Shamini, she also says, Shama, brilliant insight, observation on how companies want to pursue innovation, but without taking risk. Hence why play is so critical to realize value. Okay. Yeah, real, true. So how has ideation evolved through the years for you two?
I'll say really quickly. I'll let you clean this up, Nana. But I think at least my perspective is that ideation went from something that kind of happened over time to something that we were actively engaging and hunting out, and knowing that, like, when we're launching a brand, it is just a starting point. A lot of times our clients would look, when we would hand over the keys to something we built, campaign, brand, whatever it is, they're like, oh, we're done. Great. We're going to go into the world. And it's like, no, we've just got to the starting line. And that evolution and ideation is actually the most critical part of any long-term sustainable business or brand, which means listening to your audience, listening to culture, examining all the factors of how time moves and what is moving with that. So for me, it's a transition of something that happened and to something that you're looking to do, and actively saying, hey, look, we know this is an evolutionary process. We don't always need to hit home runs. We need to get on base and then move from there and continue to ideate. I'll give you one example. And this is probably one of my favorite examples of the mindset that Nana rolls with every day. We have been doing the photo class for probably like 4 or 5 years. And it's the end of the year, it's December, like we're getting ready to go on break. And Nana's like, hey man, I don't really want to do photo class anymore. I want to start teaching an entrepreneur class. I'm like, okay, cool, great. When do you want to start? He's like, January. I said, what? And he was dead serious. He's like, I need some marketing material. I'm starting this class in 2 weeks. And I'm just like, how are you going to do this? And even being around him for all those years, it still impresses me that he just said, no, I'm going to do this thing and I'm going to iterate on it. And when you think about when we first launched the first version of Hope to where it is today, from delivery systems to content, everything is night and day. And he looks at things as a beta process. He's like, no, I'm going to jump in the water now and put it out there and see, and let it evolve, let the ideation happen by force of friction, to see what people picked up, to see what people let go, and to see how I was going to grow and change through that process of teaching.
Yes.
So he knew all of that in advance, and also welcomed that uncertainty of, I don't know how this is going to show up. You know, letting go of perfection. I think we have such a hard time with that. You know, people want to start a business. They want to write a business plan. They want all these things to fall into place, all this perfection to fall into place. And then they launch it and it's like field of dreams, the people will come. When the process is totally different. It's really about offering something to people, to your audience, to people that you think will care about it. And then you got to have that courage. And so to me, in a nutshell, just being able to say, you know, he probably had just thought of it. He had probably been thinking about it for a week and then called me and said, hey, I need some marketing material for this class and I'm going to launch it in 2 weeks. That to me is just the essence of stepping into uncertainty and being ready to ideate. You know, and the class went from our old studio with, you know, probably 10 to 15 people a week to the next year, it was 50 people a week to now it's, you know, hundreds of people online, you know, from around the country. So that is that for me is ideation, is like diving into it and accepting it versus it's sort of something that happens to you over time as you deal with road bumps in your business.
Yeah, and may I just two
Please.
I want to just dive two areas that I think that two things he mentioned that I think that deserves a little attention. Quite often, because we'll just go back to that idea that, you know, African Americans don't feel like they're good enough. So sometimes when a microphone's placed on our face, say, how do you solve a problem? We try to assume we can answer that question. And so how do we solve oppression? We assume we can answer the question. How do we deal with the deterioration of entrepreneurs in the Black community? We try to answer those questions. And where we need to be honest with ourselves and say, we don't really absolutely know. You know, we may be qualified to answer the question. We may be qualified to deal with the problem, but we don't know. And so we have to kind of build research and development in our processes, meaning that we have to say to ourselves, we're going to try multiple things. Every time something fails, that's data. And that data moves closer to an answer. And the closer we get to the answer, it qualifies us to lead or to move in that direction. But I think where we go wrong is we think that we have to, from the point we start, we have to be perfect and we have to end perfect. And the reality is that we're going to have to discover. So we have to accept mistakes or failure, because the failure is data to help us actually achieve our success. And so we have to give ourselves room. So even if we're raising money as a nonprofit, we have to say to ourselves, hey, we're going to raise a certain amount of money to try new ideas daily so we can get to the point where we get closer and closer to things that work. Now, things that work, here's another thing. This is the second point. The market nor people are static. Things are always changing. So what might be right today could be wrong tomorrow. And what may be wrong tomorrow might be right today. So even when people say, what is the secrets of success? There's no such thing. There's multiple things that can work. Now we can tell you, now we're very clear on things you should not do. I'm very clear, but there's very clear about, and we could maybe another discussion, we could talk about things you shouldn't do in business or things you shouldn't do in building, right? But there's so many paths. And so what am I saying? What I'm saying is that you can't rely upon prescriptions in this space. You know, the 5 steps, or I meditate in the morning, or I just do this, or I do this, or I follow this principle. I think sometimes prescriptions gives us a false sense of knowledge. What you have to rely upon is critical thinking. Being able to analyze, look at the sample size, look at your data, engage, have empathy, see, make decisions, and then also don't personalize those decisions. Because once you personalize, let's say you make a decision and it's wrong today, but you personalize it as if I made a bad decision, and that means I was dumb or I was bad. Well, that same decision might be a right decision 6 months from now, but you can't make it because you put a personal stamp on top of it. And so you have to give yourself to realize that in business, you're just making decisions and you're not going to always be right. And when you're wrong, that's just as valuable as being right, because wrong is information.
Let me add something. We at the studio, we have this thing called No Gurus, and it's something that Nana and I talk about in class all the time. Is that no matter what information source, myself, him, anybody, there are no gurus. So you need to take the information that you're receiving and test it for yourself, because information alone is worthless. It must be applied. You must test it. You must use it. And if it works for you, great. I love meditating in the morning. It works great for me. It might not work for you. It might not help you focus. You might need to run. You might need to bike. You might need to do something else. Just sip a piece of some coffee and read the newspaper. Find what works for you personally that lets you activate the best self that you can move into your business with. I think we're looking for these cheat codes on, like, okay, if I just do these 10 things religiously, then I'll be successful. And it's like, it's not possible. Culture is always moving. Like Nana says, that we live in a dynamic environment. You know, you think about culture in the lab, you're talking about something growing, right? So it's no coincidence that when we're talking about culture on earth and people, it's something that's always growing and changing and moving. And so you have to grow, change, and move with it. And that's personal ideation. Personal development is just that path, is that same mindset that allows you to grow as a person will enable you to take that into your business and grow in those same ways.
I'm going to put on the screen a number of comments. I think you saw this one earlier, Mashama, from Dr. Solomon. He would not make it through the pandemic without being in the whole class. That speaks volumes. And then Robert Hazard shares, awesome discussion. What you do at 510 Media is certainly impressive. Growth mindset at its best. And then Roy Robles writes, how do you see play being used or not used in education? Maybe schools start off with lots of play, but it seems the older you get, less play there is, in particular with academic subjects. Can academic subjects have more play?
Yes, absolutely, 100%, 1,000%. That is what we're trying to get back to, is that youthful expression. When we were kids, we moved with a freedom, and it's no wonder that that's the time we learn the most. We engage with the world, right? You want to set up things that are challenging, but also safe, right? So moving in a way that in higher education, we get away from what is success, A's, B's, high degrees, all this stuff doesn't mean much when you get down to the only thing you have in your life is your experience. Moment to moment, all you have is your experiences. So shouldn't they be joyful? Shouldn't they be filled with play? And as we get older, why would we detach ourselves from that for a sense of, well, I'm an adult now, so I have to be serious about these things? Yeah, sure, there's plenty to be serious about, but we can always use the idea of play to further ourselves. I think education, specifically higher education, hinders itself because it's based on marks, degrees, and not actual engagement, right? I could go my whole career and just live in education. I could get degree after degree after degree, and people say, hey, that's successful. Now that person has to determine that for themselves, but actually engaging with the world around you and understanding moment to moment that all you have is the moment, this experience. Right now, all we have is this. How do you feel? Are you building an engine? Are you building a life engine that produces the challenges, the ups and downs that you want, that are enjoyable, right? Because pressure and pain come, it's the other side of the coin of joy and love, right? So are we doing that? Are we facilitating that? I think we are lost in education, at least in this country, around the idea of status and success and degrees and what car can I drive, what house can I have, right? And we've lost the idea that really it's just comes down to our experiences. So absolutely, we can change higher education. Last thing I would say, a few years ago, I was working on a school design project, and I had the good fortune to be in Boston and go to the MIT design lab. And it is a massive building filled with nothing but the best and brightest, and they're all playing.
That's right.
All given license to experiment, and they're building all the things that we'll see in the future, right? Like mind-blowing things. And it's all about trial and error and research and development and failure. So at the very top, we see it, but everything else is really built around organized learning and compliance. And so getting away from that, because we're no longer in an industrial society, right? We're now in an information-based society. So we don't really need to build people to work in factories, because factories are robots now, right? So we have to give people more access to the idea of diving into uncertainty, which I think is play at all levels.
Reminds me, oh, go ahead, Nana.
I want to add real quick. So from running Hope for 5 years, the first year I thought Hope was just going to be a 1-year course. And we announced it a Year of Hope. That was the original name, a Year of Hope. And we used the word class. And both of those words, year and class, became limitations. What we discovered was learning just doesn't work like that. I think there's a need for subsidized education. I don't think I want to dive into whether, universities work or not. That's not really a discussion that sometimes, because that gets really murky, right? But I do believe, especially for African Americans, we definitely need subsidized education. Let me explain to you why. Because learning requires a saturation and a baking of knowledge, meaning that a lot of the students that were with me the first 2 years are still in the class. Because and every year they read some of the same books, they swear they never read it the year before. Because as they remove a layer of beliefs or ideas, or as they remove a certain bias, or as they digest new information, they go back and read the book and they see new information, right? And then to see information and to observe information are two different things. And to gain ownership of information, it's like, for example, you can see something in theory which lacks application. But then when you actually start to tinker with it and you start to apply it, then you see it differently. And then here's the other thing. You need to be in a group, in an environment of organized learning that reshapes this form of thinking, meaning that individuals next to you are giving you testimonies. There's people who are helping you see past your blind spots. It's people who are sharing with you stories. And through that process, you normalize this form of thinking. Because here's the thing we forget. Our poverty is programmed into our way of thinking. If we read 4 or 5 books, or if we take a class, that poverty is always pulling on us. That's our comfort zone. That poverty mindset is always saying, "Hey, come on back. I know you do stuff, but I can always take care of you." And so, if you're not in a different environment, and so I think where we go wrong is sometimes we think that we graduate and then we achieve something. I tell most college students the 2 most important things about college. One is networking, relationships, as many relationships as possible. But number 2, college is designed to teach you how to continue to learn, not how it doesn't give you your education doesn't end with a degree. It's the beginning of education. And I think where we go wrong is that you see a deterioration of learning after school. And so in Hope class, we're trying to stimulate the value of just lifelong learning, not learning for a goal, but realizing that you have to keep learning, and what you think you know, you probably don't even know. So I think there's a need for African Americans. There was a huge deterioration in our, when we came out of slavery. Once again, we focused on, well, what do we do? So many of us just went back to work, right? And so because we never discussed freedom is, when you talk about freedom, you're talking about controlling your food, clothing, shelter, your housing, you're controlling your health, you're controlling your utilities, you're controlling your land, so you control all these different things. In order for us to get into that game, we're going to have to change the way we see reality. the way we think, the way we're processing ideas. And if we're going to do that, we're not going to get there trying to focus on approval and alignment. We're going to have to say, well, what do we need to digest to move ourselves forward? So that comparison thing where white people have this or black people have this, we have to stop that conversation and say, where do we need to start? One of the points I made, this is my last point in class, I tell people sometimes starting small allows you to grow, to educate yourself and develop skills and knowledge that will allow you to become big. And so a lot of times African Americans, instead of us trying to be Kaiser Hospital, why don't we become Kaiser the first year, which is that small building in a community that's serving the people, and then continue to evolve to maybe 20, 30 years from now, we're actually Kaiser, right? But we have to start realizing that there's things we need to learn to compete. The way racism looks to us is not because another group is superior, it's because of the mindsets that we've lost because of slavery, Jim Crow, crack era, all these different things. So I just want to say that subsidized education, I think, is a must.
There's so many gems in what you two have just shared. One thing that comes to mind is I remind my clients, I remind loved ones, I remind myself that life is about growth. And Dr. King said something, I'm not going to paraphrase well, but years ago he said, most of us live to our early 20s, and then our physical bodies may be here into 50, 60, 70 or longer years, but we died when we were in our 20s because we stopped learning. We stopped growing. Powerful. There are other messages here. I just want to place love the fluidity and dynamism that is being suggested, the sacred wisdom of the ages. Do you revisit the collective indigenous messages through your work in hope and play, especially as we embrace technology, quantum computer, AI, social media, etc.? Got to come back to that question. I'd love to hear how you navigate and honor both the ancient and present with the future. Alice Cooper, beyond Chamonix's question, says, hope forces you to learn in a way that truly allows you to own the information that's being given. And Christopher Foster writes, incredibly grateful for 2 degrees. Hope shifted me dramatically from theory to application, and the discovery that there is no there. It's a constant journey. Powerful. So let's go back to the question that Chamonix asked. Do you revisit the collective indigenous messages, especially considering what's going on with regards to technology, quantum computer, AI, social media? How do you leverage those?
I don't think you can divorce it. The first class of hope in our orientation classes, which is the first 3 classes, we tell individuals, whether you're Christian, Muslim, you will have a great appreciation for your religion when you finish this course. A lot of these principles are in the ancient material. We study, also we realize that when you look at the faces, like sometimes I think we become history snobs. So we'll say, oh, back then, as if back then means that they were less intelligent, right? And we realize that if you look at pictures of people from back then, they look just like us, and they bled just like us, and they process just like us. And what you'll find is that there's a lot of wisdom in our past, a lot of wisdom. We're both lovers of history. We pay attention to a lot of ancient wisdom and a lot of ancient knowledge. We love Stoicism. There's different things that we actually study that allow us, that integrate into our messaging. Also, let me add this to the hope class and the play class. It's not all espoused by us. In part of our class, we post podcasts from numerous individuals to show that it's just not our form of thinking. That we just plugged in. We don't want to, like I said, Mashama said, we're not gurus. We're students, and we're students teaching students, right? And so, and in a lot of the research, we're pulling from deep source material that is a lot more. I would almost argue that some of the ancient material is more anti-fragile. Now, with technology and social media, although these things are new branches of human behavior, they're still attached to the core human behavior. And so once you understand the core human behavior, then these things you can kind of translate what are the popular trends these things are going to, what's going to happen because of these things, or where things are going to shift, right? For example, why is Facebook so popular? Because humans still like to function in tribes. So you can say go home by yourself, but ultimately I'm heading home by myself on the computer. I still want to hang out with the tribe, and so this is what gives social media its wings. And so yes, we fully connect to ancient wisdom, ancient culture, ancient religion, ancient belief systems, and one of these days, if you ever pull us in and have a discussion on religion, it's an interesting discussion.
You want to add anything to that, Mashama?
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I would say is everything we're doing is focused on the human operating system. And so what that means for us is everything that exists today is just a change of context in which we exist. But we haven't evolved as much as our technology has. And so we might have that new smartphone layer like kind of plugged on top. But at core, we're still the same scared, aggressive animals that we've been. And so understanding that and understanding that there's been thousands of years of people trying to dissect what does it mean to live a human lifetime. And play in particular, we look at Joseph Campbell's work. He studied thousands of myths and seen the parallels and seen the plight that we've constantly struggled with on how and why we are here. These are big, like sort of cosmic questions that we kind of dive into that are really the backbone of who we are as humans. What does it mean to be here? I think that's something that Nana and I both talk about, is like the ability to be, you is 1 in 400 trillion. And to be born as you on the time that you're born here on Earth, a planet hurtling through space and time. All these things are really, really big cosmic ideas that are essentially the observation of who we are and what does it mean to be here on a planet that's been here for billions of years and will probably be here billions of years after us. And we have 100-year span, we have 80 years or 100 years, 120 years, depending on who you are. And so you got to look to the people that have studied this. What does it mean? What is experience? What is it like to be human? And what is it like to find purpose and meaning, no matter who you are and what era you're born in? That is literally the backbone and the driver for everything that humanity sort of is, and everything else is just the cultural context shifting and changing around us.
Interesting. So Silent Films writes, on the point of subsidizing education, are there any plans in the works to create Hope youth programs in an attempt to plant these growth mindset seeds at an earlier age?
Yeah, one of the things we're working on now is we have 5T Media as our for-profit, and we created Hope, Play, and Frame as our nonprofit. And the goal with the 5T Media Frame, Hope, and Play is to raise money to put it in his own building. And in our own building, other things we want to raise money for is to boil some of this education down into a digestible level for grade schools, junior high, high school, because if we can start priming our children early to think different and to see the reality different, because one of the things we teach, and so in Hope, we focus on thinking about how do we think about reality, right? And then we shift into discussing the impact of the ego. Then we shift into emotional intelligence. Then we shift into behavioral economics. And then of course while we're doing that, we're delivering all these different strategical tactics on how to solve problems and how to move forward, and how to think about different challenges. And yet we also do it with a hip hop flair. So if you class, because that's how I like to dress. And so we try to remove some of the traditionalism from the class, because we people often come to class and like, hey, these guys got on hoodies and baseball caps. What kind of class? But then the information, if you sit there just for one class, you realize that we're not doing this typical self-help stuff, right? And I think that's one of our greatest challenges, making that separation between what we do and self-help. Because self-help is very inspirational and motivational. But what our goal is to actually change. And because we're trying to change people, we have numerous stories of entrepreneurs who, one, either started their business with hope and are doing exceptionally well, or we even have stories of individuals who could make more than $1,000 or $2,000 a month and who are making enough money to take care of their whole family. And so our goal is like, we want to get away from prescribing all these quick fix solutions and ideas to looking, analyzing the class and figuring out how can we move these people from point A to point B. And that's so critical. So even in our class is very, very dynamic. So we're trying to boil all that down and then create a formula that can actually be planted in the schools. But then also at some point, I still believe that education has to be subsidized. I just, because at the end of the day, I think schools have limitations. Like if you have to try to learn all this and you have to follow a strict timeline and have to be delivered while all this other information is coming in, I think that's kind of a distraction. This information does require a deep level of focus because we're attacking. It's proven that when you try to restructure your brain as you get older, it becomes harder. Your brain wants to resist that, and that friction. Now the benefit is amazing, but the older you get, the more your brain will create a stressor. It attaches stress to change, and so the reality is that we got to be able to provide environments for people to help them go through that process and hope they get that process and let them know. When I was younger, and I remember training at the gym, and I had a trainer, and the trainer says, no pain, no gain. And I remember I used to feel so. I'd be like, I'm going to go home. He's like, no, that's. Well, you have similar mental stressors that will quit. And so you got to have an environment where you have other people around you that are saying, hey, it's okay. Or last thing, stop shaming yourself. Stop calling you stupid, or I don't know why I don't know this, or what's wrong with me, or I've never been good because of some narrative you told yourself, or I've never been good at math because some narrative you told yourself, right? We have to
narratives others have imposed on one.
Imposed on us, absolutely. And so we have to be able to remove those or create an environment that I don't like the word safe space because I think it's been hijacked a little bit too far, but create an environment where we're more supportive. We're coaching, we're supporting, we're aligning, we're helping, and we're holding hands.
Let me say that I've got about 7 additional questions, and we're almost at the hour. That's how rich this has been. And I've purposely been quiet more because folks are not here to hear me. They're here to hear you two. And you've been brilliant. I want to ask this one question, though. When discussing hope and play, you highlight, you reference the centrality of mindset as integral to your work and the successful efforts of your business and the business leaders and entrepreneurs to whom you serve and you continue to work with. I have to ask the question, why? Because I think this is a powerful area, mindset. Why is that important? Just in a very simple statement from you, Nana, and from you, Mashama.
Well, this is probably like my favorite quote ever. It's from Sam Harris. The quality of your mind determines the quality of your life. So that's that. If you just wrap your head around that, and so working around mindset. When you see the rose, are you experiencing the rose or are you experiencing the thorn? Right? You're experiencing both. But what you choose to focus on is how your life will become. And so to me, understanding what mindsets you're using, and in life, we kind of jump through different mindsets for different times, but it allows you to see the rose over the thorn. You're going to always experience both. But in order to continue your journey, you kind of have to lean into the hope of it, right? The positive of it, or else it's just like, well, why am I here? Why am I doing this? And so that's the power of mindset. Everything we experience is happening within this framework called consciousness. Literally everything.
Yes.
And so if we just stop and watch what happens, most 99% of what is happening around us just arises. It just bubbles up. And so we start assigning meaning to those things that are inherently meaningless.
Mm.
Like data, information, sensory input is inherently meaningless, and we get to assign the meaning. The last thing I would say is, this is, when you're talking about humans, you're talking about trauma, you're talking about history, you're talking about past, and the power of I think hope in particular is it exposes your ability to go to time travel back in time into your past and reassign the meaning of something to allow you to move forward with different outlooks, and to create different actions. And that's all a mental mindset, right? So whether it was, my girlfriend or boyfriend abused me, my father or mother, abandoned me, whatever it is, you can go back in time and say, look, my parents are doing the best that they can with what they had. And it really was no reflection of me, right? And so I can now let that anchor go and I can move forward. And so that's, to me, that's central to how your mind is working, and having the ability to observe that and not just be in a chain of belief and bias and reaction, to everything that's happened. So that's kind of my perspective.
Powerful.
Yeah, I don't really have much to add besides what we also realize is that if we don't attack with the mindset psychological distortions, these ideas and beliefs that are not true, but things you can't prove it. Like if you went to court, you can't prove it, but you say it all the time. For example, fairness is a psychological distortion. So you say that's not fair. Well, with 8 billion people on this earth, fairness is relative, and fairness usually happens in small groups, but overall fairness doesn't exist. Or the word should, what somebody should do or what I should do, that's a psychological distortion. And I can go on through a host of psychological distortions, right? But when you're dealing with things like psychological distortions, depression, trauma, ego, heuristics, rule of thumbs, things that we've been taught all of our life, and we follow these ideas as if these ideas, we got so used to a point that we don't even use the part of our brain that can actually manage mindset is called System 2 by the rules of Daniel Kahneman, and System 1, System 2. And System 1 makes all the fast decisions every day. And if your part of your brain that's making all the fast decisions is operating under this very elementary approach, irrational elementary approach, no matter how deep the subconscious is, you're going to constantly kind of find yourself in the more superficial space, right? The last thing is that bias. A lot of people, one of the things we found is that a lot of African American men, and justifiably so, have huge egos, and a lot of times they think when they join a group, it's about superior knowledge to inferior knowledge. No, all human beings are intelligent. All human beings are intelligent. That's not the challenge. And intelligence, I don't know how you measure intelligence. I just don't really know how you measure it because it's relative. But what we found is that when you have emotions or you have passion or anything of the sort, you develop biases. And so, for example, me and Mashama have been bias managers of each other. I might start on a journey and go, hey, I'm going to do this. And Mashama say, hey, did you realize you missed this? And bias, once again, bias for those out there is a mental blind spot. Things you can't see anymore. For example, if you love your child, you have mental biases. And the reason you share with other parents is just to help you avoid your biases. It has nothing to do with your intelligence, your strength, or how powerful you are, or how educated you are. It has to do with you fall in love with something and you become blind to something else. And so one of the things that we found in this process is that even when we talk about mindset, you can have the knowledge of mindset, but if you don't have people around you to help you with your biases, you can't use the tools to actually amplify your mindset. So you can be aware of your mindset, but you could be performing in a fixed mindset space and can't even see it because of some emotional connection you're having. And so it's so important that you surround yourself with individuals who are moving in a progressive direction that can just tap you on the shoulder every once in a while and go, hey, that's a blind. Not, hey, I'm superior to you, let me be your guru. That is not the case. And that's one of the reasons you want to form groups that are driven towards whatever you call success, so we can actually avoid those psychological biases.
Whew. Thank you. Gratitude. The word thank you and gratitude seems so woolly and sufficient, given the gems that you've, as I think it was Zerica stated earlier, you've been dropping throughout this hour. And so I just have to thank you. And I want to tell this brief story. The first time I met Nana and Mashama, I got to just pick on Nana. I didn't know this guy. I just went from one thing to the other, right? Mashama was in the background laughing, cracking up. Like, yay!
It was great. So, excellent.
Yeah. So that was my introduction to the two of you. And let me tell you, thank you, Nana, for just going with me and allowing me to drop one joke after the other on you in a very lovely environment of our friends. And more importantly, it's been an honor to know the two of you and to know the work that you're doing is literally impacting lives in ways that are not only measurable, and as I would say to one of my friends who's brilliant researcher, I would suggest even immeasurable. And then as Shamini says, grateful for your gifts, human transformation through hope and play. Thank you, exclamation mark, she notes several times. I want to thank you again. What you did is remind us, and you do daily, is remind us of the importance of understanding what you said, Ashama, the human operating system, and leveraging it in a way that honors it and allows it to self-actualize through the creative space. And this hope and this play in partnership is a beautiful co-creation. And so I want to encourage those who are viewing this live and those who will see this later to be thinking about how to leverage others as part of leadership in order to ensure one's success, in order to ensure business success. And certainly 510 Media is available for your leveraging as well, based upon their own intake system. They're all about edifying the overall geniuses that they experience and the well-being and effectiveness of organizations. So with that, I just want to highlight that a few other comments that have just come in. I'm sure more will come in as we tune out, but thank you for staying with us. One of the most beautiful things about Hope and Play is that it's building a community family that will not only support you professionally, but tell you the truth and hold you accountable to do the work. That's MQ 510. And then Ashley Cooper says, this is why we love them, exclamation mark. Roy says, thank you. And so with that, I want to thank you again for being here, for sharing with our audiences, and given a lot of questions that we didn't get to answer. If we could bring you back later on this year or next year, would you be open?
Absolutely.
Only if you start capping on Nana the whole first 15 minutes.
I can do that. I can do that. I think the audience would love that. I don't know if Nana would be able to sit in his chair through it all.
No, you're too good. You're way too good.
It would be awesome. So my pleasure. And folks, we look forward to you rejoining us next week at Lead Live on Wednesdays, noon, USA and Canada, Pacific Standard Time, and 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we will get information out through our leadlivenow.com regarding our subsequent broadcasts. So if you're interested in subsequent shows, please go to leadlivenow.com so that you can sign up and receive regular updates of subsequent broadcasts. Thank you so much, and have a wonderful balance of the week. See you soon, Nana and Mashama. Thank you.